Danny Cole pushed his mop across the observation deck floor and watched the stars drift past the massive windows. The Starward Drift was a beautiful ship, all polished metal and gleaming surfaces, and it was his job to keep it that way. He had been cleaning this vessel for 8 months now, working the night shift while diplomats and important people slept in their comfortable quarters. It was not the life he had imagined for himself back on Earth, but it paid the bills and kept him fed. That was enough for a man who had spent 15 years fixing cars and trucks in a small garage before everything fell apart. The observation deck was empty at this hour, or so he thought. Danny pushed his bucket around a corner and stopped when he heard voices coming from the sitting area near the windows. He recognized the clicking speech of those tall insect creatures who always looked at humans like they were examining something unpleasant on the bottom of their feet. Danny knew he should announce himself, but something in the tone made him stay quiet and keep working in the shadows. Counselor stood near the window with 3 other alien delegates. His segmented body was covered in ceremonial robes that probably cost more than Danny would earn in 10 years. The compound eyes reflected the starlight as he spoke to his companions in that superior way of his. "The humans think they deserve full membership in the Commerce Council," said with a sound that might have been laughter. 3 years of provisional status, and they believe they have earned a seat at our table. It would be amusing if it were not so pathetic. A merchant, all tentacles and wet skin, bubbled something in response. Danny did not speak their language, but the tone was agreeable. "They have nothing to offer," continued. "No advanced technology, no unique resources, no cultural achievements worth preserving. The only thing humans seem good at is cleaning floors and carrying heavy objects. Perhaps we should keep them around as servants." Danny's grip tightened on his mop handle. He had heard this kind of talk before. The galaxy was full of species who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, and they all seemed to agree that humanity was the new kid who did not belong at the party. Danny had learned to ignore the insults and keep his head down, but sometimes the words still cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He finished mopping his section in silence and moved on before anyone noticed him. The diplomats had their world and he had his. That was just how things worked. The next morning, Danny was heading to his quarters when he passed the main conference room. The door was open, and he could see Ambassador standing at the head of a long table. She was a tall woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many difficult negotiations. Danny had always respected her because she treated the cleaning staff like actual people instead of furniture. "The council has added a new requirement," was saying to her small team. "Each species applying for membership must now demonstrate their unique contribution to galactic civilization. We have 3 days to prepare something meaningful." Lieutenant Corinne Boyd leaned forward in her chair. She was the ship's head of security, a practical woman with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. "What kind of demonstration? Combat, technology, cultural performance?" "Anything that shows why humanity deserves a place among the established species," replied. "That will present mathematical theorems, that will showcase economic models, that will share ancient philosophical texts. We need something that makes the council see us as equals." "And what do we have?" someone asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. Danny kept walking, but the conversation stayed with him through his shower and into his bunk. He lay there staring at the ceiling and thinking about what it said. Maybe the aliens were right. Maybe humanity really did have nothing special to offer. They were late to the galactic stage, thousands of years behind everyone else. What could they possibly show that would impress beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel before humans had invented the wheel? He thought about his old garage back in Ohio, the smell of motor oil and the satisfaction of fixing something that everyone else had given up on. There was nothing special about it, nothing that would impress a galactic council. It was just honest work done by ordinary hands. But there was something else too, something Danny had learned from years of dealing with broken machines and impossible deadlines. When a car came into his shop with a problem nobody could solve, Danny did not walk away. He stayed until it was fixed, even if it took all night, even if it seemed hopeless. That was just what you did. The announcement came over the ship's speakers that evening. High Assessor, the ancient who led the evaluation committee, had finalized the schedule. Demonstrations would begin in 3 days, with humanity presenting last. Danny heard the news while he was restocking his cleaning supplies. Last place meant everyone would have already made up their minds before humanity even got a chance to speak. It was not fair, but nothing about this situation was fair. The deck was stacked against them from the start. He grabbed his mop and headed back to work. The observation deck would not clean itself, and Danny had never been the type to sit around feeling sorry for himself. Whatever happened with the council, he still had a job to do. That night he mopped the same floors where had mocked his entire species. He scrubbed the same windows that looked out on stars humanity had only recently learned to reach. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that maybe the aliens were wrong. Maybe there was something special about humans after all. They just had not figured out what it was yet. The emergency meeting lasted 4 hours, and Danny heard most of it while cleaning the hallway outside the conference room. Ambassador and her team threw ideas back and forth like people drowning and grabbing at anything that might float. Nothing worked. Every suggestion crashed against the same hard truth that other species already did it better. Human art, someone suggested. Our paintings, our music, our literature. They have been creating art for 50,000 years, replied. Their symphonies make our greatest composers sound like children banging on pots. Our engineering then, we built ships that reach the stars. With technology we bought from them, every piece of our fleet uses their designs. Corinne Boyd spoke up from her corner of the table. What about showing them what humans can do in a fight? Our military history is full of examples where we beat impossible odds. Shook her head slowly. We cannot present ourselves as warriors. The council already thinks we are primitive and violent. Showing them our talent for killing each other would only confirm their worst assumptions. The room fell silent again. Danny pushed his mop in slow circles and listened to the sound of hope dying on the other side of that door. He was reaching for his bucket when his elbow caught the handle and sent it crashing to the floor. The noise echoed through the hallway like a gunshot, and suddenly the conference room door was open and everyone was staring at him. Sorry, Danny said, picking up the bucket. I did not mean to disturb you. Looked at him for a long moment. There was something in her eyes that Danny could not quite read. Desperation maybe, or just exhaustion. You are Danny, yes, the night shift janitor. Yes, ma'am. Do you have any ideas about what humanity could demonstrate to the council? Danny blinked. He had never expected anyone to ask his opinion about anything important. He was just the guy who cleaned up after everyone else, but was looking at him like his answer actually mattered, so he thought about it seriously. I do not know much about galactic politics, he said finally. But back home, people always said the best thing about humans was that we do not give up, even when things are bad, even when everyone else says it is impossible. We just keep going until the job is done. Corinne made a small sound that might have been agreement, nodded slowly, but Danny could see she did not know how to turn that into a presentation. He picked up his mop and went back to work. The important people had important things to figure out, and his floors would not clean themselves. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Delegations from 4 species arrived on Prime to present their demonstrations to the Commerce Council. Danny watched from the shadows as they filled the Grand Assembly Hall with holographic equations that danced in the air like living things. They had solved mathematical problems that humans had not even discovered yet. The council applauded politely and marked their evaluation forms. They came next with economic models so complex that Danny's head hurt just trying to follow the basic concepts. They showed how their trading systems had brought prosperity to dozens of worlds, how their algorithms predicted market movements with perfect accuracy. More applause, more checkmarks on the forms. It took an entire day for their demonstration. Their philosophy was ancient beyond measure, passed down through countless generations of 6-armed scholars who had spent their lives contemplating the nature of existence. High Assessor listened to his own people's presentation with obvious pride. Through it all, the human delegation sat in their assigned section and watched. Danny had been given permission to observe from the maintenance corridor, and he saw the looks on his people's faces. They knew they were outmatched. Whatever they presented would seem like a child's drawing compared to the masterpieces the other species had created. On the evening before humanity's scheduled demonstration, Danny found Trade Master waiting for him in the observation deck. The merchant looked uncomfortable out of the water, his tentacles moving in slow patterns that Danny had learned meant concern. You are the cleaning human, bubbled through his translator. I have seen you watching the proceedings. Yes, sir, just curious about how things work. Made a sound like air escaping from a balloon. I will tell you how things work. The Council has already decided to reject humanity's application. They made up their minds before any demonstrations began. This entire process is just ceremony. Danny felt something cold settle in his stomach. Then why go through with it? Because appearances matter. The Council cannot simply refuse without justification. They need to show that humanity was given a fair chance and failed on their own merits. Paused, his large eyes studying Danny with something that might have been sympathy. I am sorry. Your species seems decent enough, but you have nothing special to offer, and in the galactic community, that means you do not belong. The merchant left Danny alone with his mop and his thoughts. Outside the windows, Prime hung in the darkness like a jewel wrapped in clouds. Somewhere down there, important beings were deciding humanity's fate over drinks and polite conversation. Danny found Ambassador in her quarters an hour later. She was sitting at her desk, surrounded by rejected proposals and empty coffee cups, looking older than he had ever seen her. "Ma'am," he said from the doorway, "I was wondering something." She looked up with tired eyes. "Yes, Danny. You asked me what makes humans different. I have been thinking about it ever since, and I keep coming back to the same thing. It is not about what we can do. It is about what we will not do." "What do you mean?" Danny leaned against the doorframe and thought about his old garage, about all the nights he had stayed late because some farmer needed his truck running by morning, about the satisfaction of fixing what others had thrown away. "We will not quit," he said, "no matter what. That is the only thing I know for sure about my people. We do not know how to stop trying." Stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen and started writing something down. "Thank you, Danny. You can go now." He nodded and headed back to work. Tomorrow was the big day, and whatever happened, the floors still needed to be clean. The morning of humanity's demonstration began with disaster. Counselor stood before the assembled council with his compound eyes gleaming and announced a change to the proceedings that sent whispers rippling through the grand assembly hall. "My fellow delegates," the said in his clicking voice, "we have spent many days watching presentations and listening to speeches. I propose something different for our final evaluation. Instead of another performance, let us test the humans with a practical challenge. Let them prove their worth through action rather than words." High Assessor shifted in his ceremonial chair and considered the proposal with his ancient eyes. It was older than any human civilization, and his 6 arms moved in slow patterns as he thought. "What kind of challenge do you suggest?" asked. "Something simple, something that reveals true character." Gestured toward the maintenance area at the back of the hall. "Each species will send one representative to perform basic repairs on a standard cargo hauler. The task will test problem-solving ability and practical skills. First to complete the repairs earns honor for their species." Ambassador rose from her seat with anger barely contained in her voice. "This is not what was agreed. We prepared a cultural demonstration as required by the Council." "Are you refusing the challenge?" asked, and Danny could hear the trap in his words. Perhaps humans only excel at talking about what they will do rather than actually doing it. The hall went quiet. Every eye turned toward the human delegation, waiting to see how they would respond. Stood frozen, caught between outrage and the knowledge that refusing would look like weakness. Danny did not remember deciding to stand up. One moment he was in the maintenance corridor where he had been watching, and the next he was walking toward the center of the hall with his mop still in his hand. The other humans stared at him like he had lost his mind. "I will do it," he said. His voice sounded strange in the massive hall, too small and too human. "I used to fix machines back on Earth, cars and trucks mostly, but an engine is an engine." Made that clicking sound again, the one that passed for laughter among his kind. "The cleaning human, this is your champion." "He volunteered," said slowly, her eyes meeting Danny's. Something passed between them in that moment, some understanding that Danny could not quite name. "And in our culture that means something." High Assessor raised 2 of his 6 arms for silence. "The challenge is accepted. Each species will send 1 representative. The cargo hauler will be brought to the repair bay. You will have until the task is completed. There is no time limit." The other species selected their representatives quickly. They sent a maintenance drone, a creature bred and trained specifically for mechanical work. Its multiple limbs ended in specialized tools that clicked and whirred with obvious purpose. They chose an apprentice merchant who looked annoyed at being pulled away from more profitable activities. The sent a scholar named who made it clear through his body language that manual labor was beneath his dignity. Danny looked at his competition and then looked at himself. He was wearing his cleaning uniform, stained and worn from months of hard work. His only tools were a mop, a bucket, and a collection of cleaning supplies. The specialized equipment the other species carried made his simple gear look like something from a primitive museum. The cargo hauler was waiting in the repair bay when they arrived. It was an ugly thing, all sharp angles and exposed machinery, designed for function rather than beauty. Danny walked around it slowly while the others immediately began their work. He needed to understand what he was dealing with before he touched anything. The drone moved with terrifying efficiency, its built-in tools finding problems and fixing them in smooth mechanical motions. The apprentice poked at the engine with obvious boredom, looking like he would rather be anywhere else. The scholar stood at a distance and criticized everyone's technique without actually doing any work himself. Danny finished his inspection and felt his heart sink. The repair bay was stocked with tools, but they were all designed for alien anatomy. The wrenches were meant for claws. The diagnostic equipment required tentacles to operate. Even the simple hand tools were shaped for the six-fingered grip of the. Nothing here was made for human hands. He looked at his mop and his bucket and his collection of cleaning chemicals. This was all he had. This was everything he could work with. The smart thing to do would be to give up now and save everyone the embarrassment of watching him fail. But Danny thought about what he had told Ambassador, about how humans did not know how to stop trying, about all those nights in his garage when the job seemed impossible and he had done it anyway. He thought about, in his clicking laughter, about all the aliens who looked at humanity and saw nothing worth respecting, about his people sitting out there in the hall, watching and hopping for something they did not dare to believe in. Danny gripped his mop handle and felt the solid wood under his fingers. It was just a stick really, a simple piece of material that anyone would overlook. But in the right hands, with enough determination, a simple stick could become something more. A small smile crossed his face as he looked at the cargo hauler. The others had already opened access panels and begun their official repairs. Danny walked to a different section of the machine, a place where the metal casing was dented and stuck from what looked like years of neglect. He wedged his mop handle into the gap and pushed. The wood creaked under the pressure, bending but not breaking. Danny adjusted his grip and pushed harder, putting his whole body into the effort. The panel popped open with a screech of metal that echoed through the repair bay. Every head turned to look at the human and his cleaning tool. Danny ignored them all and got to work. The repair bay fell into a rhythm over the next few hours. The drone worked with mechanical precision, its specialized limbs moving from task to task without pause or hesitation. It followed programmed procedures, checking each system against a mental database of standard repairs. When something matched the expected pattern, it fixed the problem in seconds. When something did not match, it stopped and recalculated. The apprentice lasted about 90 minutes before throwing up his tentacles in frustration. The cargo hauler was old and poorly maintained, nothing like the pristine machines he was trained to work on. Every repair revealed 3 more problems underneath. "This is pointless," he gurgled through his translator. "The economic value of my time far exceeds any benefit from completing this task. I withdraw from the competition." He walked out of the repair bay without looking back. The council members watching from the observation gallery made quiet notes on their evaluation forms. The scholar never really started at all, spent his time walking around the cargo hauler and pointing out flaws in everyone else's approach. He knew the theory of how machines worked, had written papers on the subject that were respected across the galaxy, but he had never actually gotten his hands dirty, and he was not about to start now. "This is beneath me," he announced after 2 hours of observation. "I am a thinker, not a laborer. Some species were meant for higher pursuits." He found a clean spot in the corner and sat down to watch the others fail. That left Danny and the drone. The machine was ahead by a significant margin, its purpose-built tools allowing it to work at speeds no human could match. Danny was still struggling with the stuck panel he had open earlier, trying to reach components that were designed for limbs much longer than his own. He needed leverage, and his mop handle was not long enough. Danny looked at the wooden shaft in his hands and made a decision. He placed the handle against the edge of a metal support beam, positioned his grip near the middle, and pushed down with all his weight. The wood resisted for a moment, then cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The crack echoed through the repair bay. Every observer in the gallery turned to stare. The drone paused its work for a fraction of a second, processing the unexpected noise. Clicking laughter filled the sudden silence. The human has broken his only tool. How fitting, how perfectly symbolic of their entire species. They cannot even complete a simple task without destroying what little they have. Danny ignored him. He now held two pieces of wood instead of one, each with a sharp broken end. Not ideal, but workable. He wedged the shorter piece into a gap between components and used it to hold a loose cable in place. The longer piece became a reaching tool, allowing him to push and adjust parts that his arms could not reach. His hands began to bleed where sharp metal edges cut into his skin. The cargo hauler had not been designed with human safety in mind, and every repair required him to reach into spaces that scraped and gouged his flesh. Danny wrapped his wounds in strips torn from his uniform and kept working. The drone finished its repairs 6 hours into the competition. It ran a final diagnostic check, confirmed that all primary systems were functioning, and stepped back from the cargo hauler with mechanical satisfaction. They have completed the task, High Assessor announced from his position in the gallery. They are the first to finish and have earned honor for their species. Rose from his seat with obvious pleasure. A satisfying conclusion. The other species may withdraw now that victory has been determined. The scholar stood up immediately and left the repair bay. He had never intended to participate anyway. But Danny did not stop working. His hands were covered in blood now, the makeshift bandages soaked through and useless. His back ached from hours of bending over the alien machinery. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest. The smart thing, the logical thing, would be to accept defeat and walk away with whatever dignity he could salvage. Danny thought about his garage back in Ohio, about all the cars that came in after other mechanics had given up, about the farmers who needed their trucks running by morning and the families who could not afford to buy something new. He had never left a job unfinished in his life, and he was not about to start now. He reached back into the cargo hauler and kept working. High Assessor leaned forward in his seat, his ancient eyes fixed on the bleeding human. The competition is over. You have lost. Why do you continue? Danny did not look up from his work, because it is not fixed yet. But there is no point. They have already won. You gain nothing by continuing. That is not why I am doing this. Was silent for a long moment. Then he settled back into his chair and watched with an expression that Danny could not read. The hours stretched on. Ambassador and the human delegation watched from the gallery with a mixture of pride and pain. Corinne Boyd had tears in her eyes that she would deny later. Even Trade Master had stopped his constant calculations and simply stared at the bleeding human who refused to quit. Danny found a problem with the coolant system that the drone had missed. Its procedures had not included checking the secondary lines, so it had not noticed the slow leak that would have caused the engine to overheat after a few hours of operation. Danny fixed it anyway, wrapping the cracked line with strips from his uniform and sealing it with cleaning solvent that hardened into a temporary patch. He found 3 other small problems that were not part of the official repair list. He fixed those too. When he finally stepped back from the cargo hauler, 9 hours had passed since the competition began. His uniform was ruined. His hands were a mess of dried blood and fresh wounds. The broken pieces of his mop handle were worn down to splinters. But the machine was fixed, really fixed, not just good enough to pass inspection. Danny looked up at the gallery and met High Assessor's eyes. "It is done," he said. The silence in the Grand Assembly Hall lasted for what felt like an eternity. Danny stood beside the cargo hauler with his ruined hands hanging at his sides and his blood-stained uniform telling a story that words could never capture. High Assessor descended from the observation gallery with slow, deliberate movements, his 6 arms folded in a pattern that indicated deep contemplation. The ancient walked around the cargo hauler, examining it with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. He paused at the secondary coolant line that Danny had repaired and ran 2 of his fingers along the makeshift seal. "This was not part of the official repair requirements," said finally. "The competition primary systems only. Why did you fix it?" Danny shrugged, too tired to think of a diplomatic answer. "It was broken, so I fixed it. That is what you do. Even though you had already lost, even though no one asked you to, even though it cost you additional pain and effort. The job was not done. I could see the problem right there in front of me. Walking away would have felt wrong. Made a sound deep in his throat that Danny could not interpret. The old alien turned to face the assembled council members and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the hall. They completed the required repairs first. They followed proper procedures and used appropriate tools. Their work is technically perfect. This is what we expect from a species that has earned its place in the galactic community. Clicked his approval, already preparing his victory speech in his mind. However, continued, the human did something none of the other competitors achieved. He completed not only the required repairs but also identified and fixed 4 additional problems that our official inspection had missed. He did this with inadequate tools, in unfamiliar conditions, while suffering physical injury. And when asked why he continued after his defeat was certain, he said it was because the job was not done. The hall erupted in whispers, rose from his seat with anger flashing in his compound eyes. This is irrelevant. The rules were clear. First to complete the repairs wins the competition. The human lost. His additional work changes nothing. Trade Master stood up from the section, his tentacles moving in patterns of formal address. I request permission to speak. Nodded and moved to the center of the hall where everyone could see him. I have watched this competition with great interest. The drone performed exactly as expected, following programmed procedures with mechanical efficiency. When it encountered problems outside its parameters, it paused to recalculate. The representative quit when the task became difficult. The refused to participate at all, turned to face directly. And the human, with nothing but a broken cleaning tool and his bare hands, worked for 9 hours on a machine designed for alien anatomy. He bled. He suffered, and he did not stop. Suffering is not an achievement, snapped. Pain does not equal value. No, but the willingness to endure pain for something you believe in does. The refusal to quit when every logical consideration says you should does. That is not something that can be programmed into a drone or calculated in an economic model. Looked at Danny with something like respect in his large eyes. That is something uniquely human. Ambassador stood up from the human section. We came here to demonstrate what humanity can contribute to the galactic community. I believe we have done exactly that. Not through technology or resources, but through the character of our people. Danny Cole is not special among humans. He is a janitor, an ordinary man doing ordinary work. And yet when challenged, he showed you something that none of your advanced species could match. And what is that? Demanded. Looked at Danny, and Danny understood what she wanted him to say. But the words that came out of his mouth were not rehearsed or diplomatic. They were just the truth. We do not know when to quit, that is all. Every human is like this in their own way. When things are hard, we keep going. When things are impossible, we keep going anyway. Maybe that is not special to you. Maybe that is just stubbornness or stupidity, but it is who we are, and we are not going to apologize for it. High Assessor raised his arms for silence. I call for a vote. All council members will now register their decision on humanity's application for full membership in the Commerce Council. The voting took only moments. Danny watched the results appear on the central display, each species casting their judgment on whether humanity deserved a place among the stars. The numbers climbed slowly, passing through rejection territory, hovering at the boundary, and finally crossing into acceptance. It was not unanimous, and several other delegates had voted against, but it was enough. The vote is concluded, announced. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Commerce Council, effective immediately. The human delegation erupted in cheers. Ambassador was hugging Corinne Boyd. Somewhere in the crowd, someone was crying with relief. Danny just stood there, swaying slightly on his feet, too exhausted to feel much of anything except a quiet satisfaction that the job was finally done. Pushed through the crowd until he was standing in front of Danny. His compound eyes studied the bloody human with an expression that might have been confusion. I do not understand your species, said. You are weaker than us, slower than us. Your technology is primitive and your history is short. What makes you think you belong here? Danny looked down at the broken pieces of his mop handle, still clutched in his wounded hands. The wood was splintered and worn, barely recognizable as the cleaning tool it had once been. But it had done the job when nothing else could. We belong here because we showed up, Danny said simply, and we are not going anywhere. He turned and walked toward the exit, leaving standing alone in the middle of the hall. Trade Master intercepted him before he reached the door. You are wasted as a janitor, the merchant said. I could use someone like you in my trading operation, someone who does not quit when negotiations become difficult. Danny looked back at the cargo hauler he had spent 9 hours repairing. Then he looked at the broken mop handle in his hands. I appreciate the offer, but I have a job to do, and these floors are not going to clean themselves. He walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall and headed back to the starward drift. Behind him, the galaxy had changed in small but important ways. Ahead of him, the observation deck was waiting to be mopped. 3 weeks later, Danny was pushing his cart down the main corridor when Karen Boyd stopped him. "You need a new mop," she said, eyeing the broken handle he was still using. "I can requisition one from supplies." Danny looked at the splintered wood, held together now with electrical tape and pure stubbornness. It was not pretty, but it still worked. "This one is fine," he said. "It has got a lot of life left in it." Karen shook her head with something like admiration. "You really do not know when to quit, do you?" Danny smiled and went back to work. The floors would not clean themselves, and he had a job to do.